Her story is that he went out there to kill her. She was able to kind of turn it around on him. These other people are saying that's not the version of the story that she told us, and the scene of the crime doesn't show that there was any kind of a fight. There's a discrepancy here. August 8th, 1938. Jury selection took relatively little time, and the trial began at 2 o'clock the same day. Charles Kopp was the prosecutor, with Herbert Humke and Arthur Gruel for the defense. Kopp said that he would show that the shooting was premeditated, and despite what might be good reasons, a person cannot take the law into their own hands. The defense said that Milton was a sadist and a bloodthirsty individual who enjoyed watching weaker persons suffer. The defense said Lillian had probably been beat up 100 times, was threatened with death, and was told she should die in childbirth. In fact, Lillian was pregnant at the time of the shooting, with the baby due in October. The defense said Milton was so brutal that on one occasion he punched out his own mother and chased her with a butcher knife.
Wow.
Milton and his brother had a reputation as dance hall fighters, meaning they would go out to dances and then just start having
fights?
Yeah, just wild fights.
Okay.
Finally, the defense said that they had discovered the identity of the East Side brunette that Milton was seeing at the time, who had since dyed her hair red to avoid publicity. After the opening statements, the jury was brought to the Lover's Lane to see the scene of the crime. Which, by this time, there's really no evidence there, but just to kind of give them an idea of where it happened. Mrs. Louis Lutzke, Milton's mother, was called to testify, but was dismissed almost immediately because she would not stop crying. The defense attorney said that he thought this was a planned outburst. The prosecutor said he had no idea it would happen. Darlene Lutzke, Milton's 11-year-old niece, testified that she saw Lillian hide the revolver in the car weeks before the shooting. Did she plan to have the gun ready on her weeks in advance? Upon further questioning, she admitted that she saw no such thing and was told by her father to say it. Mrs. Louis Lutzke returned to the stand the next day. She told a story that 4 weeks before the shooting, Milton had returned home and his bedroom door was locked. Milton's mother told a story that 4 weeks earlier, before the shooting, Milton had returned to his home and found his bedroom door locked. He had told Lillian to open up, and she cracked the door just enough to point out a revolver and threatened to shoot him. And I have a little note to myself on here, in parentheses. This sounds like hearsay to me, and I have no idea why it was admitted. I'm not an attorney, but I think, her repeating a story that her son had told her, I don't think you can say that in court.
Yeah.
She didn't see it happen, and there's nobody else to back it up.
You might be able to say that, though, in, closing arguments or opening arguments or something.
I don't know, but that's sketchy to me, because you can say any story you want. There's nothing that they could do about it. But one of the last people to testify was Lillian herself. She told the court, "I grabbed for the gun and hung onto it with both hands. We fell. He was choking me with one hand at the time, and then the gun went off." For closing arguments, the prosecutor stressed that there was another woman, and this had made Lillian angry. He further stressed that defense's version of how the gun went off made no sense with the way that the bullet hit its target. There was no accident, there was no dropped gun. The gun was pointed and fired deliberately. The defense said that Lillian had an unblemished record, and Milton was a man of brutality. Furthermore, the defense said, "I have more respect for a Dillinger than I would have for a man of Milton Lutzke's character." He showed the jury Lillian's coat and dress from the night of the murder and pointed out the pockets were too small to hide a revolver. Any shooting was not planned. The mastermind behind the whole affair is Norman Lutzke, brother of the deceased. The whole story, the state's whole case, was fabricated by Norman Lutzke from start to finish. which is at least supported by the fact that he had his daughter lie on the stand, so got that going for it. The other defense attorney gets to make a closing statement. I guess if you get two attorneys, you get two closing statements. Yeah. He says, Milton Lutzke was a sadist. After the episode at the gravel pit, during which he beat Mrs. Lutzke severely, he sat by his prey until morning. I'm not really sure, what this is referencing. This must be something earlier in the trial. He said that he wished the state had allowed him to call the son, but it was denied because it would evoke too much sympathy. Quote, I got to love that little tow-headed fellow, and so would you. Weird phrase. And that's, again, I don't know the law on that, but that's weird to me that they're not allowed to even call him because the jury would be like too emotionally moved by it. It's a really weird thing.
It is weird, but I can definitely see why it would be. But I mean, if they could prove that he had evidence to state something, then I don't see why they could even legally say no.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know what I mean?
I don't know. And even at 5 years old, 5 is young, but it's not that young. Like if they treated him, they weren't aggressive with him on the stand, I'm sure he could tell that his dad was not nice. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that wasn't a secret. It sounds like everybody knew. So having the actual child confirm that, I think would have been helpful. But the prosecutor returned for a quick rebuttal, saying the proper way to deal with a bad husband is divorce. Even a bad man must not be killed in cold blood, he said. That's his argument. His prosecutor's really making the point here. You can get beat up 100 times, and that's not okay. But it doesn't make it okay for you to then murder the guy. Right. There's other ways of dealing with it. So he's like, the law is the law. On the evening of August 10th, after a brisk 3-day trial, pretty short for a murder trial, Judge Detling turned over the case to the jury. He gave a very lengthy instruction explaining the differences between homicide, self-defense, manslaughter, and so forth. He reminded the jury that Lillian Lutzke was the only one present at the shooting who was alive to testify. Therefore, her testimony was important, but she was also the defendant, and if other testimony contradicted her, that should be taken into account. This, again, I don't know the exact wording, but I like the way the judge handled this here. Mm-hmm. I like that he explained, if you don't want to find her guilty of premeditated murder, here's some lesser things and what they mean. And then explain that, even though she's the only one who can describe the scene, you got to keep in mind that she's got reasons she might not be completely forthcoming. Yeah. So I like that he was able to kind of guide them through that in sort of a neutral way. The jury left for deliberations. They were out a short time, 2 hours, which included a 45-minute dinner break. Wow. Yeah. So basically an hour and 15 minutes. They voted unanimously on the first ballot. What did they choose, Eric?
I'm going to go with guilty, I guess.
Guilty, you guess. That's not very confident.
No, I'm not very confident. I'm going to be honest with you because it's really up in the air.
Okay. They decided not guilty.
Okay, see, I was totally wrong.
Yeah. When Judge Detling read the verdict handed to him by the foreman, the people in attendance cheered and applauded and then crowded around Lillian to offer congratulations. I'm picturing that in my mind, and I'm like, I think they kind of frown on that.
You got away with it. Well, I'm not going to say that she did it, but...
it's an emotional moment, but I think generally the court really frowns on people celebrating in court like that. Lillian addressed the media, quote, I'm the happiest girl in all the world. Now I am finally free of everything. It's such a great load taken off my back. Believe me, these months in jail were no fun, and I'm certainly glad the trial is over. Now I am going back to stay at the homes of Mother and Dad and my sister. I want lots of sunshine, but I got plenty of rest up in jail. I'm just dying to get home to see my little Bernie. That's the trial. A couple extra things after that, but if you want to jump in at any point, you can.
Well, did she end up having the second child?
She did.
Okay.
She did. The second child is Ronald Lutzke, who was born in November 1930.